I messed up already. Here we go.
Welcome to the MarTech podcast, and I hear everything production. In this podcast, you'll hear the stories of world-class marketers that use technology to drive business results and achieve career success. Here's the host of the MarTech podcast, Benjamin Shapiro.
Welcome to the MarTech podcast. I'm your host, Benjamin Shapiro, and today we're going to talk a little bit about programmatic buying, media, streaming, all the things with your television infrastructure, all the programmatic things that you're interested in. Joining me today is Angela Marmorato. Angela, did I get it right? Marmorato?
Yes, Angelina
Angela
Marmorato.
Marmorato.
Nailed it, yeah.
Give it to me one more time.
Angelina Marmorato.
I was way off. Angelina Marmorato for the podcast, who is the Associate Vice President of North America at Lemma, which specializes in emerging formats, connected TV media, helping agencies and brands streamline supply with a privacy-first approach and dynamic creative, providing unprecedented control of their media inventory. All that to say, Angela and I are going to cover two very important topics today. One is going to be the rise of linear streaming, and the second is going to be why programmatic media buying dominates CTV. But first, we're going to start off with a fun little pitch that we like to say is elevator pitch. So, Angela, welcome to the MarTech podcast. Very excited to have you here. We're going to start off by playing a little game where we pretend that we're going in an elevator. You're in New York City, so you're familiar with skyscrapers, up 37 different floors. You got about 30 seconds to give us your pitch and tell us a little bit about who you are and what your company does. Ready? Bing!
Ding! Hey, Angelina Marmorato here. I've spent basically every day since college working in digital advertising. For the past 10 years, that's been exclusively in programmatic. I've worked for several different companies from each side, so anywhere from publishers to content creators, all the way through to the buy side, whether that's demand side platforms or now working for a supply side platform like Lemma. In addition to that, covered a lot of different angles as well. So run a lot of different campaigns as a campaign manager. I've done product work, solutions, and also sales. So a lot of experience in terms of running a ton of campaigns from B2B to pharma, et cetera. So a good background in terms of understanding advertisers' needs.
I'm really excited that you've got a broad set of experience when it comes to all of the things that are streaming, programmatic, media buying. It's an incredibly complicated space. And for the longest time, I really didn't quite understand what programmatic was because it seems to be a combination of real-time bidding, there's supply side, demand side, all sorts of confusing things. And now there is this new idea where we talk about the rise of linear streaming. So that's going to be our first topic for today. Let's start off with another little segment we'd like to call Talk Tagline. So when we talk about linear streaming, to me, that feels a little tagline-ish. I'm not sure what linear streaming is. I think of linear TV specifically being like, I turn on the boob tube and there's a channel that's on. And then streaming is like, I go to Netflix and I have to decide what I want to watch. Give me the combination of the two. What is linear streaming?
Totally. So I think, the moniker linear TV in general comes from exactly what you just said, the viewer experience, which is you turn the TV on and there's something live playing. You're joining the content in progress. And so that's the traditional experience you get with either broadcast or cable television. And so as an industry, we've started to kind of classify broadcast and cable together into linear. What makes it interesting and a little tricky, though, is that there's a new phenomenon to where digital television, what we overarchingly refer to as streaming, now there's a linear experience for that as well. And so same experience to where if you turn on your TV, there'll be a channel there playing, and then you can flip through the channels, you can do the guide. It's a very linear TV experience, but this time it's through a connected TV. And so that's where it gets a little confusing. Another term to know is FAST, which is free ad-supported streaming TV. That is basically channels that are 100% ad-supported. So and many of them are in the linear format. So a good example is if you own a Samsung TV, If you turn it on these days, it will take you immediately to Samsung TV Plus, which is their fast service. And so it's going to send you to a channel. You can then go to the guide. But the experience being and feeling very much like cable television, but it's free.
I struggle with the experience because they're different depending on your device. I think of you've got a set-top box and a cable that would be linear. I have Apple TVs in my house, so I am very sort of app by app focused. And I'm guessing that I have to choose an app and then choose what to watch. And it sounds like there's also some hardware where you turn it off and it's just playing, but it is ad supported yet streaming TV. Am I getting the segmentation right?
Yes, it's what you're mentioning here is just, yeah, the huge fragmentation that exists in the space. And you mentioned a lot of the players, and a lot of those players have rights to content. And so it gets very confusing, not only for the consumer, but for the media buyer as well. So, yes, it's very confusing, and probably in the short term will remain that way.
So let's go on to our next topic. We're going to call it marketing mythbusters. Everything that I know about linear television or linear streaming is it's supposed to be like OTT in the sense that you get this value of sight, sound, in motion from your television ads. You get all of the benefits of the digital format, and that to me is always the dividing line. Is linear television, you get huge reach, but it's really hard to track. You're looking at day parting and what channel you're on and what media you're playing. And streaming TV, you get actual, who you're serving, so you can be a little bit more specific with targeting. With none of these are you able to get real sort of click to conversion attribution. Bust the myth here that you can't use any sort of linear or streaming television to actually track to conversions.
Yeah, you absolutely can. It's a little bit different than web-based tracking conversions. The television set itself is not a cookie-based environment. So tracking looks a little different. It's all kind of based on ID graphs that are built around IP addresses, which is, what your TV is getting the connected TV data from, and any of the content that comes on your screen. So same thing is true for ad serving and all the data that comes with that. I think you touched on an interesting point too, just about the experience of linear. There's a couple, you're mentioning that you turn on the TV and it's there. There's a lot of different ways to access. So, it could be an app on your TV. It could be that you have a device plugged in. Maybe you have the Amazon Fire Stick. Maybe you have the Roku stick. Each and every pieces and parts of this and kind of changes the viewer's side of things, but it also in the back end changes from a marketer's perspective where and how they're able to access that inventory. And going back to what you were saying about programmatic and media buying and the benefits of programmatic, CTV really was kind of built on programmatic in a way that the web wasn't. So that's a very positive thing in that most transactions, even if they're bought directly with a publisher, so if I go buy directly from Disney, they will still be run programmatically, whether or not, even if it's just a direct deal, it's very specific inventory. They're often actually, served through programmatic. So it is necessary. And the good news is that the ecosystem is built on it. And so, yes, it does provide for a lot more targeting, measurement, a lot more data to be passed and used.
I want to hold off on going too deep in programmatic because we're going to talk about that in our second segment. So there's a lot to cover there about CCTV, CTV, and programmatic. I want to jump into what's the media buying strategy here. So let's talk a little bit about the game plan. When you are a brand, not necessarily a media buyer, but I'm the in-house marketer, and I'm thinking, okay, I've got this war chest of budget that I'm going to spend. I can only spend so much with Google AdWords. We're seeing some conversions in our social media ad spend, but it's getting more and more expensive. Should I be focused on going towards, television and doing more media buying with the same creative that I have? Or should I be looking to diversify, starting to work with influencers, maybe some offline channels? What's the game plan when you're thinking about budget allocation when it comes to linear streaming television?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think first and foremost for all media buying, it depends on where you are as a brand Do you already have great brand recognition to where brand awareness isn't as necessary? You're really looking to get people to go ahead and buy, or are you brand new to the market
Let-
and nobody
Let's
knows
say
who
we're
you are?
somewhere in between. We've got some brand recognition, but we're a mid-market company, right? Not publicly traded. We're not Coca-Cola. People know us, but we're still getting off the ground.
All right, cool. That's totally fair. Then in that case, you're going to want, what's called a full funnel marketing approach to where you're touching both of the aspects we just mentioned. First being brand awareness, and then more of kind of direct response type of targeting as well. What's cool about the way that CTV works today is you can accomplish both of those things. So if you're wanting to do a broad awareness type of campaign, you're going to look very broadly for content that matches the basic demographic makeup of who your target audience is. So that can be a much more broad buy that looks a lot more like a traditional television buy. What's cool about that though is serving it through the same system and programmatically, you'll be able to collect all of these folks into kind of your marketing funnel. And so then when you move down the funnel and let's say you have a different message for folks that have already seen the initial brand messaging ad a few times, then you can retarget them with a message that's more focused on, okay, and here's how you buy the product. Here's the recommended action to take. So what's cool is that, you can, and then based on the data that we know there, you can go find them where they are in the connected TV universe, whether it's on Netflix or whether it's on a fast channel, you can find them.
What I'm hearing from you is that you're thinking about your television media buying as still a top of funnel channel where you're getting reach awareness, essentially serving what I would call more of a brand message. But the benefit of connected TV is that you are able to understand an IP address. You're able to continue to remarket or retarget to those consumers in channels that are more direct response driven. Is it, hey, here's our brand, here's our message, great, now I'm going to hit you up on LinkedIn when it's buy time?
Yeah, no, to your point exactly. Like, I do want to stress that I think television overarchingly has been thought of as a more of a brand awareness play. But with today's sophistication and the way that we're able to do tracking, like I said, with IP based being the core for how you're measuring, the household. Yes, you can, get very detailed in how you're targeting somebody, and you can, instead of just saying I want to serve only on Hulu, I want to find this specific household. I know that there's somebody in there that's been to my website or, been to my LinkedIn if you have that pixeled properly. So yeah, that's a great example.
Talk to me a little bit about setting up the tracking infrastructure. It seems like that's a big component of making these campaigns work. Is we're going to cast a wide net with CTV in this, sort of high fidelity medium. Then we're going to retarget and see where there's actual engagement and interaction. How do you set up the tracking so it works successfully?
Yeah, and the tracking to that is very similar to any programmatic campaign. If you think of a more traditional display or online video campaign that involves any sort of performance element, and same thing for Facebook. You're going to be placing either, in the case of Facebook, the Facebook pixel. In this case, whichever buy side technology you're working with will have their own pixel, and so that will, you'll place that on your website. And then you'll be able to track any visitors of those that have been exposed to the ad.
So is it a pixel-based methodology or are you IP mapping? Because I feel like there's a really big difference in terms of how effective those two channels are, or
It's
those two
basic.
tracking methodologies are.
Yeah, it's kind of like all the above. And the ID graph that is able to connect various devices and various types of IDs all together into one household. And so yes, is it a very clean one-to-one match? I would say not, and I would say that as cookies deprecate, this gets signal loss is there. But I do think that there are very strong ID networks and graphs out there that make this possible.
All right. Well, I want to move on to our second topic today, which is why programmatic media buying is dominating CTV. So there's there's basically a turf war that's happening in my area of expertise, this whole new media podcast space, where it seems like the original OG podcasters came in and said, hey, let's just do host read ads. Let's bake our, all of the influence we get from being the content creators into the advertising methodology. And then there's kind of the old head, let's call them gray hair, radio folks that came in and said, no, there's a better way to do this. We're going to start building in programmatic media and dropping radio style ad spots with third party voices into your audio podcasts. I am very strongly in the camp of host read advertising, and the inferred credibility of the host talking about their sponsors is a better experience for the sponsor and for the listener, and hopefully for the host because they're selling directly, than doing programmatic media. Now it seems, press the wrong button. Now it seems that in CTV, it's a drastically different landscape where everything is third-party advertising, no integration into the content. Why did that happen? And is it the right thing?
Yeah, great question. So a funny thing about television advertising in general is actually when it first started, that's the way that it worked. It was sponsored. You would, I'm going to sponsor the Johnny Carson show tonight kind of thing. And it wasn't until about 10 years later that they, came up with this concept of spot advertising, which is where, you go and fill spots instead of it being more of a host read kind of sponsored experience. So, television has made that kind of evolution as well. It just kind of happened a long time ago. So the consumer expects to see ads that way, right? Like the consumer that is watching, let's say Amazon Prime, they expect for there to be 3 ads in a row in the middle or the beginning or end of their programming. In terms of podcasts, I do agree with you. I think it's a bit awkward to have programmatic ads. Potentially the place for them is large libraries and kind of past shows, if you will, to where, there's some inventory there that can be used that's not right now, that maybe there wasn't a host read for. But obviously I think host read, podcasts are kind of, it's a close, you feel close to the, it feels authentic. It feels like you're close to the host. You get to know them. It's more of a relationship, I would say, than just watching a TV program, to where I do think there is, genuine, authenticity and value in the host read ads.
So we're recording out loud here. I'm going to give some feedback to my editor. I forgot to run the segment that I wanted to ask introducing this topic. So we're going to do a little pretending here. I'm going to run our next segment. It's called What's the Word? And I want you to give me the word that describes where we are in the media buying landscape, for programmatic television. All right, here we go. So Angelina, give me the word that describes where we are in the life cycle of media buying for streaming TV.
We're still in the early parts. We're still, if 10 we're a fully mature ecosystem, I still think we're like at a 3, if that makes sense.
Toddler?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's nascent. Like I think when people say that, I'm like, we're a little past that, but it's still early. There's still a lot to figure out. There's still, a lot that needs to be, there's so much fragmentation that there's naturally going to be some consolidation, more standards. All the above will help buyers, media buyers, make them easier, their life.
So let's move on to a gimmick we like to call buy or sell. Are you buying or selling that programmatic media is the best way to buy media across any channel?
Both. I think you're saying any channel, so we'll pause there because we did just have the conversation about podcasts where that may or may not be true. However, I do think for CTV, for display, for open web, programmatic is absolutely the best way to buy and sell. And it's reached kind of a mature point. And so what we're seeing now with CTV is we're in the middle of that maturity. And so there's some growing pains that we're dealing with right now.
I have mixed emotions here, where programmatic media is something that can be very effective from a performance standpoint. And I think that, debate this with me, because I understand why in television programmatic works, because the consumers are trained to see ad breaks.
Right.
But nobody likes the commercials unless we're watching the Super Bowl.
Yep.
So, is integrated advertising into content more effective? I would make the argument that yes, it's just not very common in television. And so, it is the standard, but not necessarily the most effective placement, in my opinion. Go back and forth here with me.
Yeah, sure. So, like, I guess the best example of that would be something like product placement, right? So, somebody's drinking a Coke in a TV show that you like watching, cool. That's a brand, promotion opportunity for that
Did you
specific
watch the show
brand.
Billions?
I haven't seen it actually.
Oh God! Like the most product placement hoary show. I loved the show, but it's
Yeah.
like, here's a bottle of Michter's. Hey everybody,
So
look.
obvious. Yeah.
Like so, like, hey, you know what I'm gonna do? We're gonna go to this special bar, and I'm gonna bring up Michter's bourbon. Like
Yeah,
it
you're
was
like, is
so
that
like
necessary to the storyline? Probably not.
no, and they had themes related to it. It was everywhere.
Yeah. So that can, to your point, that can also feel inauthentic. Um, but yes, I think for TV for so long we've been trained for, ad breaks that um that's the method that occurs, and that's currently the most effective. I think what really needs to change a lot from the advertiser perspective is how you think about, making your advertisement more relevant to the user and to the content it surrounds. So
And
there's no reason today that like you can't have a sports themed ad around sports content. And so but we don't see that. We see the same ad 100 times from the same advertiser. And so that's kind of
that
like my point of
that's inherently
frustration.
the problem, right? With programmatic advertising, if you're buying sports, there's such a huge landscape within sports, right? I could be watching the World Series of Poker, I could be watching the NBA playoffs, I could be watching, women's basketball. Those are totally different audiences, and that's why like I make the argument, don't get me wrong, programmatic advertising and television, like the ship has sailed, right? And I
Sure.
understand why that medium dominates because we're moving from the linear television where people were using to buying channels and spots, and now you can get a little bit more granular. And so the media buying is wonderful as an experience, but we just don't see a lot of product placement and integration because the medium was linear.
Yeah.
We easily could do more integration. We just don't at this point.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's a frustration point for me, as a company that works on the supply side directly with publishers. There's a genuine frustration from the buy side that, it's hard to even get what genre is the show that you're serving around, what is much less like what actual television show did my ad serve as part of. So I think the entire industry needs to move more and more towards that because yeah, right now it's too broad to where yes, you could get closer, but not close enough to where it feels like a good experience.
So I want you to do something for us here. I want you to walk us behind the curtain. You work as a programmatic media buyer and are expert. There's lots of media buyers that are out there that are saying, I already know programmatic works. There's probably some in-house marketers who are saying, I'm not sure about television. It's not direct response. What's the way to make the channel work? What's the secret sauce that you're doing at Lemma?
Yeah, I think for anybody that's new to connected television, we always recommend kind of a multi-creative approach. So you first want to take a creative that's more of, like I said, that kind of brand awareness messaging. You want to have like say a 30-second and a 15-second, and then you want to have a 15 and a 30-second for more of a call to action type of creative, like, hey, go to our website, buy this now, or there's a sale today kind of thing. And you want to kind of throw that out there, honestly, for a few weeks and see when and where it translates. I'm a big fan of test and learn. So initially, a lot of times I say, hey, don't put that many, targeting restrictions on your campaign. Let the campaign run and see what's actually giving you results. So that's kind of the way that I recommend to step in. There's so much that you can learn from running a programmatic campaign that there's really no excuse not to test and learn.
Talk to me a little bit about that. What I'm hearing is start with a small budget and then get a bunch of data, learn and refine.
Yeah.
What's the methodology and what are you looking at? And I can give you an example if you want to know before we said a mid-market brand, but let's say an e-commerce product focused on males in their 40s, right? I'm running a campaign selling a new version of light beer and I want to target sports because guys, sports, beer,
Totally.
there's a clear correlation here. I'm running broadly. What do I?
Yeah, this is a good example because it brings in a factor we haven't really discussed yet, which is price point. In programmatic, that's cost per thousand typically. And so, like you're saying, a lot of sports content, or if I'm going to go buy a specific inventory on, let's say, Fox Sports, that's going to come at a much higher CPM than if I just generally target sports content. Like you said, those are two various, types of quality. We could be watching World Poker Tour versus the actual, football that you're trying to get in front of. But again, it's something worth testing to see, does paying a lot more for Fox Sports really drive the actions of the consumer that I want? Like, are they really going to my website more often and buying this product? Or is my cost per acquisition or cost per site visit, is it better if I'm, a little bit more broad in my targeting? And so those are the kind of things you can look at.
We use a lot of programmatic advertising to build the MarTech podcast audience. We're constantly advertising and trying to get people to understand the podcast is there. And then we're always looking at different channels to understand what's our most effective media buying source. And to me, it is conversions, but you're looking at the media source first and then getting into demographics and some of the other data points that you can. When you're buying, are you looking at things like what's the channel, what's the show, what's the broadcast, or are you looking at like white male, mid 40s, urban market, your demographic information?
Yeah, I mean that depends a lot on which buying platform you're using. Some offer the level of audience insights that you mentioned, and some don't. In nearly every case, you can sort through kind of by inventory. There is still a major challenge in connected TV to where, like I said, it's not very often that you get show level information, and even if you do, it can look very different from impression level reporting. So it's hard for even the reporting system itself to kind of collate that in a meaningful way. But this is that's a benefit of working with an SSP like us, is we can help you get the level of metadata that you need, and kind of help you get your reporting in a place where it's more meaningful.
I want to move on to our shout outs and call outs. We have a comment here from Nick. Looks like Nick Frankel. Do you know Nick Frankel?
Yes, I do.
Nick
Something
Frankel
he would
says,
say. Yeah.
That's not programmatic. That's not the fault of programmatic, though, which I think is probably related to me saying, hey, I think that baked in advertising where you're getting host integrated is more powerful. That leads into podcast host read advertising. Also, influencer campaigns. Sounds like Nick is in disagreement if I'm getting at any comments on Nick's thoughts.
Yeah. I think he's just, advocating for programmatic, and that, and I think kind of going back to your point, there's a lot that, host read ads, the world is changing. Like AI is becoming a lot bigger part of what we do. Maybe an AI learns your voice, and maybe all the programmatic thing does is insert, a few words, to where, then it is something to where you can make it a bit more programmatic.
In reference to streaming partners not giving enough options. There we go.
That is fair, and that is true. And to be fair, even if you buy direct from a lot of these partners, they still won't give you that information. So it's not only programmatic's kind of, it's not just programmatic that occurs in.
In general, it's my biggest concern about programmatic advertising with CCTV. There is so much bifurcation, let's call it. Your different channels, different apps, different supply side vendor. It's so hard to find the secret sauce and understand what's working. I truly believe you need a really good media buyer if you're going down this road. It's really hard as a channel to implement if you're buying directly and you don't have someone who is constantly buying this type of media. It's why we work with third-party vendors to help us put our programmatic ad buys together for the MarTech podcasts. I know that I said that we were going to move on to shout outs and call outs. Give me a couple shout outs, call outs, people that you think are innovating in the space, anybody that you want to mention, anything you want to promote.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's cool to see that even some of the big players like Netflix and Disney are experimenting with that more linear style TV experience. So, like we talked about earlier, those are traditionally like video on demand. So you log in and you get to go pick what you watch. Even the what we would call most premium players are experiencing more and more with the linear experience, to where you just hop right in to something that's playing. Um, I think the reason for that too is there's kind of this decision fatigue that happens a lot with streaming platforms too, to where it just becomes overwhelming to choose from all the selections. Like sometimes people just want to turn on the TV, have something to watch in the background, and so that's, I think, another strength of fast channels and the linear experience in general. So I think that's a strength of the fast programmers like Samsung, Fubo, Plex, etc. There's a bunch of them.
We got another comment here from our good friend Sarah Condiff, formerly of Podsites, now I believe at Spotify. Sarah, great to see you. Thanks for joining in and watching the show. I want to wrap up here by talking about something that you said that I think is really important: decision fatigue. I see this all of the time with programmatic advertising. It's really hard to figure out the right mix, the right blend. And to me, that's why, as an in-house marketer, promoting different media brands that we built that are podcasts or, sort of omni-channel content, when we think about programmatic advertising, I'm like, hey, I need a media buyer. I need somebody else to handle this for me. And we're not doing OTT, which is even more fragmented than the media space that I work in. I very much believe that with programmatic media, it is somewhat dangerous to try to do this channel at first on your own. It's one of the spaces where I think you need an expert. You need someone who can start your campaign so you can start to learn, have them educate you. And then you decide if you get the channel working, then you can start to pull and build some of this stuff out. It's one of those where it's better to pay a professional to help you get off the ground than it is to try to experiment and figure it out yourself. And that wraps up this episode of the MarTech podcast. Thanks to Angelina. I am so sorry. I've mispronounced your name like 3 times. Thank you to Angelina Marmorato, the Associate Vice President of North America at Lemma, for joining us. If you'd like to learn more about Angelina, you can find a link to her LinkedIn profile in our show notes, or you can visit her company's website, which is lemmamedia.com, LEMMAMEDIA.com. Just one more link in our show notes I'd like to tell you about. If you're listening to this in the live stream, by all means, feel free to comment. Even though it's after the fact, we will still respond to you. We just got another comment here. Best wishes to the MarTech pod. Good to see you in August. What a wonderful comment. Thank you very much. If you're listening on the podcast and you didn't have a chance to take notes while you were listening, head over to martechpod.com. We have summaries of all of our episodes. You can get contact information for our guests. You can subscribe to our weekly newsletter, and then you can even apply to be a guest speaker on the MarTech podcast. And of course, you can always reach out to us on social media. This live stream was published on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn as well. You can reach out to me there. My handle is Ben J. Schaap. You can also find our content at MarTech Pod. And if you haven't subscribed yet and you want a daily stream, of marketing and technology knowledge in your podcast feed. Let me try this again. If you want a daily stream of marketing and technology knowledge in your podcast feed, we publish episodes every day during the work week. So hit the subscribe button in your podcast app, and we'll be back in your feed tomorrow morning. All right, that's it for today. But until next time, remember, your answers are always in the data. I read the wrong tagline. But until next time, remember, my advice is to just focus on keeping your customers happy. Angelina, welcome back. Now that we've had a chance to read the whole podcast outro, thank you for helping us record out loud. I read the Voices of Search podcast tagline. Anything else you want to add? Anything that we should talk about before we let everybody go?
Just shout out to Lemma. I think what we're doing is super interesting. As a supply side partner, there's some additional advantages that we can offer to any type of programmatic buyer when it comes to sorting through inventory and connected television. So, if you are a programmatic buyer, don't forget about the SSPs, because we do have a unique offering when it comes to helping you kind kind of go from, intermediate to advanced in terms of the type of targeting you're doing. So
for the sake of the podcast, give me the definition of supply side buyer for everybody that's not already in programmatic, so they kind of have an understanding of the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So an SSP is a supply side platform. And so that means that we are the platform kind of working on behalf of the publishers, the content creators, the media companies. So, that would be A&E or AMC. And sometimes it's like Fubo as well. So yeah, basically what we do is we plug directly into those partners. We help them, with yield optimization, pricing, auction dynamics, basically helping them get the most money and most value that they can from the buy side. And then, so that's kind of our day-to-day, what we do. But, there's more and more kind of disintermediation happening to where, and working directly with buyers, we found that, we can accomplish some stuff too. That's super helpful for them.
Yeah. So for everyone that is new to programmatic advertising, an SSP is essentially the company that goes around and gobbles up the hole in the inventory. And that's the place where you are able to place your ad, and then you buy through a buy side platform. So give me an example of, if Lemma is on the supply side, who are some of the providers that media buyers go to place the buys?
Yeah, totally. So that's a demand side platform. So it could be, hands-on keyboard in there. So it could be the Trade Desk. It could be Google's DV360 product. Could be somebody like StackAdapt. And then there's also kind of platforms that are built on top of DSP. So, if you think of something like a Mountain, Ryan Reynolds' company, then basically that's a company that
programmatic advertising. What does that guy not do?
Yes, seriously.
I thought he was a soccer owner.
That makes it easy for somebody to just go into the system and pick what they want and set up a campaign really easily without having to be kind of that advanced level of programmatic trader that we were talking about earlier.
Great. All right. For the sake of the podcast recording, giving notes to my editor, Panos, let's put the definition of SSP before we talk a little bit about what Lemma does in the shout outs and call out space. All right, everybody. Last chance for comments before we let you go. I'm going to give a 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Angelina, thank you so much for being my guest. And apologies, I think I called you Angela like 4 times.
That's
but
okay.
We'll clean it up in the post production. Thanks for being my guest.
For sure. See ya.